Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF.
Hi, Amber Bell here, and this is Real Agriculture. I am standing here today with Shane Strydhorst of Alberta Pulse Growers and Pulse Canada. And we're going to be talking today in this Pulse School about alternative pulses. So specifically faba beans and lupins for this episode. So welcome, Shane. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
So speaking about these alternative crops, you are a faba bean grower and have been growing them for a while, right?
Yeah, I've got about 15 years of experience growing faba beans on our farm, and they've worked really, really well in our crop rotation.
Fantastic. And what made you decide to dive into faba beans? What was your decision on that?
I guess first of all, I saw them in a couple of plot tours that Alberta Pulse Growers hosted back in the day and continues to host. And I thought they looked like a great crop to try. And yeah, the harvestability is fantastic, and they're a really prolific nitrogen producing crop, nitrogen fixing crop. So they work really well.
So regionally, we're in the Westlock area right now. We're actually at a Gateway Research Organization event. And so this area is ideal for faba beans, or what would you say when it comes to what regions you'd be wanting to grow them in? Yeah,
they work really well here. We typically get 8-10 inches of rain in a growing season, and a lot of years even more. Faba beans are a moisture-loving crop. Cooler season crop and a long season crop, and it works really well here, but there are a few tricks that you have to employ to grow them too.
So what would be some of those tricks?
Well, definitely have to get them in early. Some years we're mudding them in the spring to get them in early enough, and they're quite often the last crop that we harvest.
Okay.
But the standability is excellent. We've harvested them in the snow before, and they stay standing, so that definitely is a plus.
That's awesome. And how does that compare to lupins? Do you see lupins as coming up to be a really good alternative as well? Is it something you've considered growing?
I've considered growing lupins. They're kind of being rolled out carefully and slowly. I think one thing that's being done is the market is being developed alongside acres to make sure that they grow hand in hand. Lupins, I think, are probably adapted to similar areas as faba beans. They like moisture, a little bit longer season crop again. Great standability, so for harvest, they're a nice, easy harvest crop that way. But there are a few other little tricks and challenges that I've heard for growing lupins.
Okay, and what are those?
For one, I think they have to be seeded a little bit shallower than the other pulse crops, because compaction can be an issue for emergence. We're very limited with our in-crop herbicide options for lupins, so you definitely need a very clean field, good application of edge in the fall, and a good pre-burn in the spring, and then kind of limited to some Group 1 grassy herbicides and Sencor. They do not like high acids or high pH soils. They prefer acid soils, and they can be a little bit tricky to establish because they don't like a compaction layer in the soil. And yeah, and the harvest of lupins can be a little bit tricky as well with pods that can burst open. So if your crop is just about ready to go, you better be on top of it and ready to harvest.
Right, and they're kind of the new kids on the block. Are they fairly widespread, or are they picking up traction? What would you say to that? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, the acres of lupins right now is fairly small. It's being rolled out by a company called Lupin Platform Inc., trying to establish a market and a production together, which is really important to help the crop to grow successfully. And yeah, there's a few uses for lupins for dairy cattle rations, and they're being used in ice cream, which I haven't tried, but I've heard it's delicious.
I like ice cream. It's really good. And then, so what would you say, talking about markets, what does the market look like when it comes to faba beans? I mean, we talked a little bit about lupins and touched on that now, but yeah, when it comes to faba beans, have you found it's fairly marketable, pretty easy to sell off the crop?
It's been fairly easy for us to sell over the years. We've had quite a bit of success selling into the feed markets. We've also several times sold into export markets. This past year in particular, they were exported in containers to Egypt. I guess they use them for snacks over there, which is great. And yeah, we're also trying to encourage getting some more processing online in Alberta and in Canada, just to do some value adding. There seems to be quite a bit of interest in the ingredients from processing faba beans, so yeah, I'm optimistic that we're going to have some opportunities there as well.
And what would be some reasons that growers might choose to go with a more alternative pulse instead of, let's say, peas?
Probably the biggest thing is the root rot complex, as we're calling it, a suite of diseases that affect the roots of peas and lentils. Aphanomyces is the big one, fusarium wilt is another problem, and sometimes the symptoms can be confused. So if you suspect you have issues in your field, it's good to get it checked out. And the great thing about lupins and faba beans is they're not susceptible to these diseases. So
Oh, wow.
we can grow these crops successfully. So farmers are in the regions of the province where they have enough rainfall, they're having these disease issues in their peas. These are great crop options for them to consider.
And then what about insect resistance? Or, I mean, we're actually standing in some plots here that have been hailed out. Do you have a sense of how well they handle hail, insect pressure? Is it any different than any other pulse?
I guess my experience with hail on faba beans is they can be destroyed pretty ugly, and they have regrown. They're a fairly indeterminate crop.
Yeah.
The difficulty there is, of course, you have a long season crop and you're just delaying maturity even further by doing that mechanical damage, but it has been done. The big insect pest of faba beans is lygus bug. I don't think they really impact yield that significantly, but they cause spots on the seeds, which, depending on the end use, it can be a problem. Livestock don't care, but people don't want spots on their beans.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so are there any resources that producers can go to if they're looking at maybe trading up and going from a pea crop to a more alternative pulse?
Probably the easiest resource is to contact your farmer neighbor or Alberta pulse grower director that's growing these crops. And if you can't get the answers there, then you can always go on to the Alberta Pulse Growers app, and we have an Ask an Expert section. So you can ask your question, and one of the experts on staff will give you an answer.
That's really handy. Does it take a little while to get information back, or are they pretty quick on the draw?
I think they're pretty quick on the draw. Probably depends on the season and how many questions and concerns are coming their way, but I think it's pretty quick.
Very cool. And do you have any words of encouragement for producers as we go into the harvest season?
I just want to wish everybody a safe harvest, and yeah, go get her.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. And that was Shane Strydhorst on Real Agriculture.